They called him the Golden God. Robert Plant, hair like spun sunlight, voice that could shatter glass and heal wounds in the same breath. But gods don't bury their children. Gods don't watch their brothers fall. And gods don't spend 50 years running from their own mythology. The archive footage flickers to life. Plant on stage, 1973, backlit like a prophet, arms raised to a sea of worshippers. This is the story of Robert Anthony Plant, a man who became a legend before he understood the price, who sang of mystical lands and ancient battles while his real war was fought in empty rooms at gravesides in the terrible silence after the music stopped. Robert Plant didn't die young like so many rock gods. He lived, and sometimes that's the harder tragedy. The question hangs in the air like smoke from a burning stage. Is survival harder than dying young? When the crowd loves the icon, who loves the man? August 20th, 1948. A boy is born in the black country of England where factory smoke writes prophecies in the sky. Robert Anthony Plant. 20 years later, he would rewrite the language of rock and roll. But first, he had to survive being nobody. He's singing in pubs for £3 a night, sleeping in vans, dreaming of something bigger than Birmingham. His voice is already there, that wild, wailing thing that sounds like it's being torn from his chest. But nobody's listening yet. Nobody knows that this scruffy kid with the curly hair is carrying the future of rock in his throat. In a cramped flat under weak lamplight, young Plant reads Tolkien. The pages are worn, coffee-stained, Middle-earth, misty mountains, ancient battles between light and dark. He's absorbing mythology like medicine, storing it away for songs he hasn't written yet. This is where it begins, not on stage but here in the quiet with fantasy novels and folk records spinning on a cheap turntable. The mysticism is being planted seed by seed, waiting for the right moment to bloom. His father wanted him to be an accountant, safe, respectable, a man with a pension and a tie. But Plant's voice had other plans. Even as a teenager, it was already there, that strange, otherworldly instrument that seemed to come from somewhere older than rock and roll. He'd listen to blues records until the grooves wore thin. Robert Johnson, Howlin' Wolf, Muddy Waters. Men who sang like they were channeling spirits from the crossroads. Plant understood something instinctively. The voice wasn't just about hitting notes, it was about possession, about letting something bigger than yourself speak through you. He bounced between bands with names nobody remembers now. The Crawling King Snakes, Band of Joy, Hobbs-Tweedle. Playing to crowds of 20 in pubs that smelled like stale beer and broken dreams. Some nights he made £3, some nights he made nothing. He slept in the back of vans, lived on chips and the occasional kindness of strangers. His mother worried. His friends from school were getting real jobs, settling down. Plant kept singing, kept chasing something he couldn't name but could hear in his head like a distant song on the wind. There were moments when he almost quit. Nights when the van broke down in the rain and he had to walk 5 miles in the cold, guitar case banging against his leg. Mornings when he woke up on a stranger's floor, hungover and broke, wondering if this dream was just delusion. But then he'd get on stage, open his mouth, and feel that thing happen. That moment when the voice took over and he wasn't Robert Plant from Birmingham anymore. He was something else, something ancient and wild, and the few people in the crowd would stop talking, stop drinking, and just stare. Word traveled slowly in those days. No internet, no viral videos, just whispers from one musician to another. There's this kid in Birmingham who can really sing. Jimmy Page heard those whispers. He was putting together a new band after the Yardbirds fell apart, and he needed a voice that could match his vision. Not just a good singer. He needed someone who could scream like a demon and coo like an angel in the same song. Someone who understood that rock and roll was about more than volume. It was about transcendence. Then came the phone call that changes everything. 1968. Jimmy Page, session guitarist turned visionary, needed a singer. Someone who could match his ambition, someone with fire in their throat and lightning in their lungs. They found each other like two halves of the same storm. Plant auditions in a tiny room, and when he opens his mouth, Page knows. This is it. This is the voice that will carry his vision into immortality. Add John Paul Jones on bass, Steady Brilliant the architect, and John Bonham on drums. Bonham, Plant's childhood friend from Birmingham, the thunder to his lightning, the brother he chose before he knew what brotherhood would cost. Led Zeppelin, not just a band, a mythology taking human form. They rehearsed in a basement and emerged as gods. Their first album drops in 1969, and it doesn't climb the charts, it detonates them. Plant's voice does things no one had heard before. It screams and whispers in the same line. It channels ancient blues singers and Celtic warriors. It sounds like sex and violence and spiritual ecstasy all at once. The crowds begin to gather. The legend begins to grow. The critics hated them at first. Heavy, bombastic, just noise. Rolling Stone magazine dismissed them as a pale imitation of real blues. But the critics weren't standing in those concert halls watching teenage girls faint when Plant walked on stage. They weren't feeling the floor shake when Bonham's drums kicked in. They weren't witnessing something primal being born, a new religion with 4 prophets and a gospel written in distortion and sweat. Plant became the face of it all. He was impossibly beautiful in a way that transcended gender, feminine and masculine at once, with those golden curls and bare chest and hips that moved like liquid sin. Cameras loved him. Teenage girls wanted him. Teenage boys wanted to be him. He was Dionysus reborn in denim and leather, the god of ecstasy and abandon. But off stage, he was still just Robert, still called his mum on Sundays, still got nervous before shows, still carried a book of Welsh poetry in his bag. The first tour of America was chaos. They played clubs that couldn't contain them, broke attendance records, left destroyed hotel rooms, and stunned audiences in their wake. In San Francisco, Plant sang with such force that he burst blood vessels in his throat. He finished the show anyway, blood on his lips, smiling like a warrior who just won a battle. In Texas, the entire front row of women rushed the stage and security couldn't stop them. Plant disappeared under a wave of hands and hair and screaming, emerging minutes later with his shirt torn off and scratches on his chest, laughing like it was the most natural thing in the world. They were becoming bigger than music. They were becoming myth, and myths, as Plant would learn, demand sacrifice. But it's 1971 when everything changes forever. November. The rain hammers down on Headley Grange, a remote country house in Hampshire where 4 men are about to create 8 minutes that will define a generation. The cameras are handheld, shaky, intimate. Smoke from cigarettes and incense curls through weak lamplight. Jimmy Page sits with an acoustic guitar, fingers moving like he's channeling something ancient. Plant hunches over a notebook, pencil scratching, muttering words half to himself, half to whatever spirits are listening. The rain sounds blend with the guitar. Magic is happening in real time. He writes the lyrics in a single sitting, channeling something he doesn't fully understand. Medieval imagery, spiritual seeking, a lady buying her way to heaven. The words pour out almost in a trance. When he sings it for the first time, voice soft at first, then building until he's screaming at the ceiling like a man possessed, even he doesn't know what he's created. The song builds like a prayer, becoming a war cry. It starts with whispers and ends with Plant howling into the darkness, offering his soul to something vast and hungry. The world didn't just embrace it, the world worshipped it. The golden god was born that night, mane of blonde curls cascading down his bare chest, leather pants clinging to his hips, moving across the stage like water. And fire had learned to dance. He became the template, the archetype, the impossible standard. Every rock frontman who came after would be measured against this moment. Robert Plant, arms outstretched, head thrown back, screaming like he's creating the world itself. The money came in tidal waves, private jets, mansions. The excess that became legend. Led Zeppelin wasn't just successful, they were dangerous, mythological, untouchable. They played stadiums that had never held rock concerts before. They were so big that they didn't need radio, didn't need the approval of critics. The fans understood. The fans screamed until their throats bled. Plant stood at the center of it all, young and beautiful and invincible, the golden god at the height of his power. By 1973, they were the biggest band in the world, not just popular, omnipotent. They could sell out Madison Square Garden 5 nights in a row without breaking a sweat. Their manager, Peter Grant, was a former wrestler who negotiated like a mob boss and got them unprecedented deals. 90% of ticket revenue when most bands got 50%. They flew in a private jet called the Starship with a fireplace and a bedroom and a full bar. They stayed in the best hotels and trashed them for fun. The stories became legend. Televisions thrown from windows, motorcycles ridden through lobbies, orgies that lasted 3 days. But here's what the legend gets wrong. Plant was different. While Jimmy Page descended into occultism and darkness, collecting Aleister Crowley manuscripts and surrounding himself with symbols of magic and danger, while John Bonham drank like he was trying to drown something that wouldn't die, Plant collected folk records. He'd disappear from after-parties to hunt for rare traditional music in local record shops. He studied Celtic poetry in his spare time. He read Welsh mythology and Arabic literature. He traveled to Morocco not for drugs, but for the music, for the ancient scales and rhythms that spoke to something deeper than rock and roll. He married young, Maureen Wilson, a beautiful girl from home who knew him before the fame. They had 3 children, Carmen, Carrick, and Logan. While his bandmates indulged in the backstage circus, Plant would call home between shows. He'd write letters on hotel stationery describing the places he'd seen, the music he'd discovered. He tried desperately to keep one foot in the real world, even as the other was planted firmly in mythology. He was living 2 lives, the golden god on stage, arms spread like he could embrace the whole world, and Robert the father at home, reading bedtime stories and teaching his kids about ancient heroes and mystical quests. The tension between these 2 selves was enormous. How do you be Dionysus at night and a suburban dad in the morning? How do you scream about the hammer of the gods and then help with homework? Plant managed it through sheer force of will, through the belief that he could have both. The transcendence of performance and the groundedness of family. He was wrong. The universe was keeping score and the bill was coming due. The tours got bigger, the shows more spectacular. 1975, Plant is at the peak of his power, young and golden and seemingly indestructible. Madison Square Garden, Earl's Court, stadiums across America and Europe where his voice reaches the cheap seats without amplification, where grown men weep at the beauty and power of what they're witnessing. He's 27 years old and has conquered the world. Every dream he had as a broke kid sleeping in vans has come true. He has money, fame, artistic freedom, a family, brotherhood with his bandmates. He has everything, and that's when the universe begins to collect its debts. August 1975, a car accident in Rhodes, Greece. Plant's wife, Maureen, has multiple fractures. His children are injured. Plant himself has a shattered ankle and elbow. The doctors tell him he'll never walk properly again, let alone perform. He's confined to a wheelchair for months, watching his body betray him for the first time. The golden god, immobilized. The voice remains, but the body, the instrument of his sexuality and power on stage, is broken. He writes during recovery. Sitting in a wheelchair on the island of Jersey, leg in a cast, he pours his fear and pain into new songs. The rest of the band comes to him because he can't travel. They set up in a house by the sea and make an album called Presence. It's darker than anything they've done before, driven by anxiety and the knowledge that nothing is permanent. Plant sings from the wheelchair, and somehow the limitation makes him fiercer. When he screams on these recordings, you can hear the rage of a caged animal, the desperation of a man who's been shown his own mortality and refuses to accept it. He recovers slowly, learns to walk again through sheer stubbornness. By 1977, he's back on stage and the crowds roar with relief. The golden god has returned from the dead. The mythology is intact, but something has changed in Plant's eyes. The invincibility is gone. He knows now that the body can fail, that youth doesn't last forever, that even gods can be brought low by something as mundane as a car crash. It's a warning shot, the first crack in the mythology. But the real devastation is still coming, and it won't break his body. It will shatter his soul. But the real devastation is still coming. July 26, 1977. Robert Plant is on tour in America, thousands of miles from home. The tour has been grueling, city after city, stadium after stadium, the machine that is Led Zeppelin grinding forward. He's in his hotel room when the phone rings. It rings. And rings. When he picks it up, the world ends. His 5-year-old son, Karak, has died. Suddenly, a stomach virus turned lethal in hours. No warning. No chance to say goodbye. 3 seconds after he hangs up the phone, nothing moves. Plant stares at his own hand, still gripping the receiver. In the corner, a microphone stands on its tripod, silent. Outside, neon signs flicker and die one by one as if the city itself is mourning. The silence is so complete it has weight, it has teeth, it devours everything. The tour stops immediately. The band scatters. Plant flies home to England in a private jet that feels like a coffin. He walks through his front door and his wife is there, broken, and his other children are there, confused and terrified. And somewhere in the house is the room where Karak slept, where his toys are still scattered on the floor. The golden god, who could command 80,000 people with his voice, cannot speak. He stands in that room and the silence crushes stone. For weeks he doesn't sing, can't sing. The very idea of opening his mouth and letting sound come out feels obscene. How do you sing when your child is dead? The tabloids circle like vultures. Some blame the occult, others call it karma. Plant doesn't care about their theories. He walks the hills near his Welsh farm mile after mile, trying to walk the grief out of his body. He can't. Some days he can't speak at all. Other days he sings quietly to the fields, testing if his voice can still hold anything besides pain. Late one night, alone in his study, he picks up the lyrics to a song he wrote years ago. His own words stare back at him from the page, prophetic and cruel. And a new day will dawn for those who stand long. He whispers it aloud, and the words twist into something darker. A new day will dawn, but not for Karak. Never for Karak. The song that promised hope now sounds like a farewell letter written in a language only the dead can read. Months pass. Slowly, horribly slowly, Plant begins to consider singing again. Not for the money or the fame, those things taste like ash now, but because the silence is worse than the pain. Music was the only language he'd ever truly spoken, and without it, he's not sure who he is anymore. The band reconvenes carefully, tentatively. They write new material, and Plant writes a song that he can barely perform without breaking down. A love song that isn't about romantic love at all. Every word is for Karak. Every note carries the weight of grief that cannot be spoken, only sung. When Plant performs it live later, sometimes his voice cracks. Sometimes he has to look away from the audience because the tears are coming and the golden god isn't supposed to cry. Art doesn't save him. It just gives him a way to survive one more day. 1979 bleeds into 1980. Led Zeppelin is functioning again, but something has changed. The magic feels different now, darker, weighted with loss. They're planning what might be their greatest comeback, a new album, a massive tour, a return to glory. Plant is cautiously optimistic. Maybe the music can heal him. Maybe he can learn to carry his grief and still be the singer that millions need him to be. September 24th, 1980. The band is rehearsing at Jimmy Page's house, preparing for the tour. John Bonham arrives and starts drinking. This isn't unusual. Bonham has always been a hard drinker, the wild man of the band. But today is different. He's drinking with intent. Vodka shot after shot, 40 drinks in 24 hours. Nobody stops him. Nobody knows that this is different. That night, after rehearsal, Bonham passes out. They put him on his side, checking on him through the night. In the morning, he's still unconscious, and then someone realizes he's not breathing. John Henry Bonham, 32 years old, dead. Plant's oldest friend, his childhood mate from Birmingham, the one who knew him before Zeppelin, before the Golden God, when he was just Robert, a kid with a big voice and bigger dreams. Bonham was the only person who could make Plant laugh until he cried, the only one who treated him like a brother instead of a frontman. And now, he's gone. The funeral comes. October 1980. A quiet church, too small for the grief it has to hold. The three remaining members sit in the front row, Plant, Page, and Jones, trying to make sense of the impossible. On screens behind them, archival footage plays. Bonham's legendary drum solo, the one they called Moby Dick. His sticks are a blur. The thunder rolls across stadiums. He's alive, vital, unstoppable. Cut back to the church, the wooden coffin. Silence. Thunder has gone silent. The greatest drummer in rock history reduced to this. Wood and flowers and men who cannot speak. Plant has lost his son. Now he's lost his brother. The grief doesn't add, it multiplies. It becomes something monstrous, a creature that lives inside his chest and devours everything good. The three remaining members meet, Plant, Page, and Jones, and they know. Without speaking, they know this is the end. 2 months later, they release a statement. They cannot continue. Translation: Led Zeppelin is over. No replacement. No farewell tour. No greatest hits reunion for easy money. They will not desecrate Bonham's memory by pretending they can continue without him. The rock world is stunned. Bands don't do this. But Led Zeppelin was never just a band. They were 4 parts of a single organism, and now 1/4 is gone. Plant is adamant. We were a band, not 3/4 of a band. So they choose nothing. The Golden God steps down from Olympus, not in flames, not with a gunshot. He steps down in grief, quiet, permanent, devastating. The mythology is immortal. But the real man has to learn how to live. The 1980s arrive, and Plant has to figure out who he is without Led Zeppelin. He's 32 years old, and his best friend is dead, and his child is dead, and the band that defined him is dead. He could have retired. Could have lived on royalties forever, become a hermit, let the legend freeze in 1980. Instead, he does something almost unheard of in rock and roll. He evolves. He releases solo albums that don't try to be Zeppelin. They're good, but the critics are confused. Where's the thunder? Where's the God? Plant doesn't care. He's not trying to reclaim his throne. He's trying to survive. The world won't let him forget. Everywhere he goes, the question follows. Will Led Zeppelin ever reunite? At first, he's diplomatic. But as the years pass, his answer hardens. No, it's done. Let it rest. Jimmy Page wants to resurrect the past. He keeps pushing, keeps suggesting reunion shows. Page lost his band. Plant lost everything else. They can't understand each other's grief. The friendship that created magic now buckles under the weight of different needs. Plant wants to honor Bonham by letting Zeppelin die with dignity. Page wants to prove that the magic is still there. Mid-1990s. Morocco. The scene is almost silent except for wind and distant music. Robert Plant sits cross-legged in a circle of Nawa musicians, traditional healers who use music to drive out demons and call down spirits. The sun is setting over the Sahara, painting everything in shades of copper and gold. An oud player begins a hypnotic pattern. Hand drums join. Plant closes his eyes, sweat on his face, and for the first time in years he smiles. Not the rock star smile. Something smaller, more real. The last golden light of the day catches his hair, silver now, not blonde, and for a moment he looks like the golden god again. But quieter, humbler, human. He's been coming here for months, living among musicians who've never heard of Led Zeppelin, learning ancient scales and rhythms that predate rock and roll by centuries. He's trying to heal his soul in the only way he knows how, through music that has nothing to do with his legend. In interviews from this period, he looks lighter, freer. Morocco saves him, reminds him that music is bigger than fame, that the voice he was born with doesn't belong to the past. It belongs to wherever he decides to take it next. The pressure for reunion never stops. 1995, Atlantic Records offers millions. Plant says no. 2007, they agree to one show at London's O2 Arena. It's magnificent. Plant's voice has aged but gained depth. They prove they can still do it. The crowd goes insane. And then comes the offer, $500 million for a reunion tour, $500 million. Jimmy Page says yes immediately. John Paul Jones says yes. The world waits for Plant to say yes. He says no. The backlash is immediate and vicious. Fans call him selfish. "You owe us this," Page goes on record, barely hiding his disappointment. "I'm ready. We're all ready except Robert." Plant doesn't defend himself publicly, not really. But in interviews, if you listen carefully, you can hear it. He's got nothing to prove. He lived long enough to watch his legend become a prison. And he's choosing freedom. The mythology is immortal. The man chooses to be mortal instead. While Page looks backward, Plant looks forward. He dives deep into world music, into the folk traditions he'd always loved. 2007 brings something unexpected, an album with bluegrass singer Alison Krauss called Raising Sand. It's quiet, intimate, achingly beautiful. No wailing vocals, no bombast. Just two voices intertwining around songs about loss and longing and the long road home. The critics who'd spent 30 years dismissing Plant's solo work suddenly pay attention. February 2009, the Grammy Awards. Plant and Krauss win Album of the Year. On the screens, two images, 1973, a young golden god raising his arms to 80,000 worshippers. 2009, a silver-haired man in his 60s bowing humbly to a different kind of crowd. Both figures bow at the same moment, past and present, God and man, the mythology and the survivor. He's on stage accepting the Grammy, and you can see it in his face. Vindication. Not "I told you so," but something deeper. Proof that he was right to keep moving forward, right to refuse to be a nostalgia act, right to insist that artists can grow and change and still matter. The golden god is dead. Long live Robert Plant, folk singer, world music explorer, survivor. The years pass. Plant keeps making music that confuses people who want him to be 25 forever. He forms a band called the Sensational Space Shifters and tours small venues, playing music influenced by Moroccan trance rhythms and West African guitars. Sometimes he plays Zeppelin songs, but he rearranges them beyond recognition, turning old anthems into hypnotic grooves that sound like they were recorded in a desert tent. The purists hate it. Plant doesn't care. This is the freedom he's earned through decades of grief and growth. Now he's in his 70s, silver-haired, weathered, still performing but differently. The voice has changed. It's lower now, can't hit those impossible high notes that defined his youth. But it's gained something else. Wisdom, weight, the depth that comes from surviving everything. When he sings now, you hear all of it. The glory and the grief, the god and the man, the young lion and the old survivor. Modern rock vocalists. They're all Robert Plant's children, whether they know it or not. He didn't just sing. He redefined what a male rock voice could do. He brought the sensuality of blues and the drama of opera and the raw power of gospel, and he mixed it all into something that sounded like nothing else. But the question never stops. Every interview, every concert, someone asks about Led Zeppelin. Plant has learned to smile at this question, a sad, knowing smile that says more than words. He's learned to make peace with his younger self, that golden-haired god screaming to crowds that looked at him like he was the second coming. That kid is gone. He died with Kerouac, with Bonham, with the 1970s. What remains is something the crowds never asked for but needed more. A survivor. A man who chose life over legend. There's footage of him from a recent concert performing a reworked version of an old song. The voice cracks in places where it used to soar effortlessly. But the emotion is deeper now, more real. You believe he hears ghosts. You believe he spent 50 years in conversation with his past, trying to find a way to carry it without being crushed by it. He still speaks to Jimmy Page occasionally. But there's distance now. Sacred distance. We've got respect, Plant said in a 2018 interview. But I've got nothing to prove. I did that. It was beautiful. It's over. The friendship that created the greatest rock band in history now exists in careful phone calls, brief texts, the acknowledgement that they walked different paths after the same tragedy. Sometimes people recognize him in airports. They want pictures with the golden god. But the man they're photographing isn't a god anymore. He's a grandfather, a folk music enthusiast, a man who collects rare recordings of Celtic harpists and Tuareg guitarists, a man who reads poetry before bed and walks in the Welsh hills and sometimes, when he's alone, hears his son's laugh in the wind. The fame hasn't faded. Led Zeppelin's music still sells millions, still soundtracks movies and dreams. But Plant has learned something that most legends never do. How to let the legend exist separately from himself. The golden god is out there somewhere, frozen in 1973, golden and young and invincible. Robert Plant is here now, mortal and aging and infinitely more interesting. He's learned that you can honor your past without being imprisoned by it. That growth isn't betrayal, that the greatest act of respect for what you were is to become something new. Every night, somewhere in the world, a young band tries to capture that magic, that impossible combination of power and poetry. They can't. Nobody can. That lightning doesn't strike twice. But they keep trying, and in their trying, the legacy lives on. Robert Plant created a template that can be studied but never replicated, a voice that changed everything but can never truly be copied. And every night, somewhere in a small venue, Robert Plant is on stage singing something you've never heard before. A Moroccan folk song. A new original about getting old gracefully. The crowds still come. Some are disappointed he doesn't give them the golden god. Others understand this is better. This is real. This is what it looks like when a legend refuses to die but agrees to evolve. He's walking off stage after a show. Silver hair damp with sweat, moving with the careful grace of a man who's earned every year. Someone in the crowd is still screaming for the old songs. He smiles that knowing smile. He's heard that request 10,000 times. He'll hear it 10,000 more before he's done. And every time his answer is the same. I gave you that song. I gave you everything that came with it. Now let me give you this. The mythology is immortal. But he lived long enough to watch his legend become his prison, and then he found the key. The voice that once conquered stadiums now only needs to be loud enough to speak to the wind, to say the simplest, most powerful thing. I'm still here, still singing, still learning. The golden god is dead. He died on July 26, 1977 in a Welsh farmhouse, holding his wife while their child's ghost filled every room. He died again on September 25, 1980, when John Bonham stopped breathing. He's been dying slowly ever since, one choice at a time, one decision to grow instead of repeat. And in his death, something more interesting was born. Robert Plant, human being, survivor, artist. Man who learned that you don't need to be a god to matter. When the crowd loves the icon, who loves the man? Robert Plant answered that question the hard way. You learn to love yourself enough to let the icon go. You learn that fame doesn't protect you from grief. That glory is beautiful, but growth is essential. That the voice you were born with doesn't belong to the past. It belongs to wherever you're brave enough to take it. The credits should roll, but the voice remains, echoing across decades, across tragedies, across the impossible distance between the boy from Birmingham and the legend he became and the man he chose to be instead. That voice, cracked and aged and infinitely precious, still singing, still searching, still refusing to be what anyone else demands. Still, after everything, free. After the screen goes black. But the question hangs in the air like the last note of a song. Is survival harder than dying young? Robert Plant spent 50 years answering it. He survived. He grew. He refused to be a monument, and in that refusal he became something greater than the golden god ever was. He became human. And that, in the end, is the hardest mythology of all.